Nore mai ke Aotearoa Rugby Pod. Welcome to the Aotearoa Rugby Pod in Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori, Māori Language Week. Tēnā koutou katoa e matakitaki mai ana. Welcome to all the viewers out there. Come along for the ride on the show this week. Plenty to talk about as we head into Bledisloe Cup 1 in Sydney. Of course, the week after, we go to Wellington. Little known fact, the last time this was back-to-back was 2000, and that was arguably the greatest series of all time. The Jonah Lomu try in Sydney and then the John Eales kick in Wellington as the world champion Wallabies held on to that trophy. How the rugby landscape has changed since then. Plenty of other things to talk about this weekend as well, of course. We've got the Boks versus Argentina. We've got the Black Ferns going down to England. We've got the small thing of a Shield Challenge big win, well kept by Tasman against Wellington. And of course, we look forward to the weekend ahead and read some of your questions for the team as you go for the Gilbert Ball, courtesy of our friends at Player Sports. And as always, next to me, James Parsons, 2000. Do you remember that?
Oh, I remember it. I think it was Craig Dowd who gave the penalty away.
Yeah, his last act as an All Black.
Yeah. Well, when he coached us, he used to always bring it up. He's like, don't have a memory like this. So it still haunts him to this day.
Finish on top. Yeah, fair enough too. And of course, we've got Bryn Hall, who's not just a halfback these days, he enters the driving mauls as well. An extra forward.
Well, he was half back, so I suppose half forward's the other option. Did you slide over the back? Were you technically correct, Bryn?
Well, I just kind of put my head there, Jip. I think, luckily, I actually got cleaned out from it. The guy that was at the back of the maul, he kind of just took me out of it, so I actually ended up being not too bad. But yeah, I think if it was going to continue a little bit more, I could have got myself in a bit of trouble. So Biggs, our coach, just told me to either get it right or get out of there, son, was pretty much the way he was saying it to me. So yeah, good to get a win. Good to get a win. We needed it, and yeah, a lot of our boys played really well. I thought Sean Stevenson and Tane Edmund were outstanding for us. So yeah, hopefully this can continue for us now and we can start going up.
Tane Edmund, I mean, he's not in the Wallabies squad. He's obviously had a lot of potential over the last few years. Do you think, Brenner, that he should be close to Donaldson as far as getting into that squad is concerned?
Look, I'm just biased because I play with him, but I would not be surprised if Joe Schmidt is watching him very, very closely while over here, because I think the way that he is playing, now look, I know international rugby is a little bit different, and even Super Rugby, the intensity is a little bit different, and he probably doesn't have as much space that he has had at North Harbour, but look, the way that he prepares, his accountability, his work ethic is second to none. So all the traits that you want in your 10, and he's a very young man, he's still in his early 20s, and to be able to command a team, which he does with us, along with Shooter and myself, and our other leaders, yeah, I think he'll go pretty close. I know Tom Lyon is probably the third option that they're seeing there at the moment, but if they aren't seeing what they're wanting with Tom, I think Tane, he's played some really good footy, and that's probably the best thing for him, right, is that he's playing consistent footy, a lot of minutes, and being able to be a focal point in our Harbour team at this stage.
Yeah, I think the big thing is he's playing footy. I think it's a big message. You know, the Waratahs finish, you know, instead of going to shoot Shield and then going into one of the biggest pre-season eras, he's playing footy and he's putting his, I suppose, his hand up. The one thing I love about his game, and I think it's something that the Wallabies could actually do a lot from, is how he comes out the back of that forward pod, Bryn, and he always attacks that seam, very similar to what Richie Mo'unga, we saw him do it a hell of a lot when he was with the Crusaders. And because he attacks that seam, it tightens the defence up, and if it doesn't tighten, he's actually fast enough to get through there. And why I bring that up is because I've been quite critical of the Wallabies in terms of how much rugby they play between their two 40s and sort of stay away from kicking is that ability to take the line on will open up kicking threats as well as running threats as well as, you know, freeing up those outsides. But Joe Schmidt, you'd have to think, has got an eye on him because he's performing extremely well.
Let's talk about Joe Schmidt. Obviously coming off a huge loss, a very unimpressive performance from the Wallabies, probably throughout. Even when they're in the lead, they weren't as good as the lead might have suggested. When you look at that, where do you think Joe Schmidt's going in the preparation of this team?
Well, I think, look, he's going to challenge attitude because, let's be honest, like, defence is all about the individual. You've got a one-on-one tackle to make. So those one-on-one tackles, yes, the system has to play its role, and yes, if you're broken, you can cover it. But the fact that they just kept on getting bent on the outside and having to retreat, not having the ability to sort of slow that ruck speed down, there has to be a focus, a change in focus in and around the breakdown defensively. I just don't think they're buying themselves enough time, and it's all well and good getting numbers on feet, but, you know, just spending a little bit of, I suppose, currency in and around that breakdown to try and slow it down. And even if you don't you've still got to get moved, which means there's attacker. If you look at the Argentinian game, no one cleaned rucks. So they had 15 people on their feet pretty much, because by the time that ball's popped, they were getting up and making double efforts. So I think somehow in the collision area, they've got to win that and get some dominance, and then try and get some pressure in that breakdown to at least slow it down or not turn it over. Without that, look, I think they've shown some developments in the attack, but off the back of that Ardie performance, it would be the defence that concerns me the most, especially with how strong the All Blacks attack did look for 60 minutes of both sort of test matches. Yes, they weren't being able to finish it off, but man, they were creating a hell of a lot against a side that, you know, is a lot better than the Wallabies.
Bryn, when you look at that Wallabies outfit and the way that they're defending, is this going to challenge the All Blacks? Will they just walk over the top?
No, not necessarily, and we've seen that probably even last year. Maybe it might have been actually last year in Dunedin. That test match was really, really close, and the margin of errors in test match footy, even if you are ranked where they are to where the top end are, they can still have their day, right? I think they have all the ingredients, but their trouble is that they can't get it right in certain areas at times under immense pressure. So if you look on when they played the Argentinians gain line success was at 52%. You know, that's the highest that it's been in the rugby championship. That's obviously with the South Africans as well, who are usually in and around that high 40s. So coming back to Jip's point, if you're going to give that much time and space and not doing your work at that breakdown area defensively, the Argentinians just picked them off, and the All Blacks are very, very good at picking players off and being able to, I guess, get over the advantage line and then being able to make good decisions of square hands or being able to get their ball to space. So defensively, the contact area is going to be massive for them. If they don't get that right against us, then they're going to have a really hard day. And then on the other side of the ball, in the Rugby Championship, they've been the lowest percentage when it comes to the gain line. So I know they've been really tight in and around that first pod off the sideline because they obviously must be wanting to go through teams. But like Jip said, the Argentinians would just put in 2 in the tackle, and then they were just pretty much sometimes just 1 in the tackle and then just spreading the field. And then they fell into the trap of playing a high phase count, tiring out their forwards and then being able to get not any paid from that. So the balancing up around having the ball and being able to be really good in and around that breakdown area, but then also if they are using too many injuries, they can go to their contestable games. Like Tate McDermott and Jake Gordon did that a lot during Super Rugby. So whether they can actually have those kicking exits or be able to have pressure put on other teams through their kicking game. Look, you could even see the attacking kicks that the All Blacks did against Argentina as well, with Damien McKenzie putting in ones little in behind for Will Jordan and co. Starting to think about how they can make pay without the ball in hand if they're not getting the attacking pitches that they want.
You mentioned Sean Stevenson and just that importance of, I suppose, the pressure and the connection between him and Tane. I sort of feel with the Wallabies, you know, we are fixated on their 10s, whether it's Lolosio or Donaldson, and that focus is always there. It's the same with the All Blacks, always the focus on the 10. But it just shows the worth of a fullback and those early comms, but also a fullback that can kick. Now, I'm not saying Callaway can't or Wright can't, but it's not a natural, I wouldn't say it's a natural thing. I'd say they're more out-and-out wingers rather than fullbacks that play wing. And having that release or outlet, and I know that's probably why they've moved Stewart into that position, but it's not. There's no release valve to sort of just rip it back 10 metres and then kick.
No Reece Hodge pumping at 60 metres down.
And it's I suppose that's probably why they play so many breakdowns, because they're not seeing the pitches to kick. But it's because of I feel like their structures or potentially their selection isn't allowing them to identify that as soon as possible.
I think that's actually a really good point, because actually talking to Tane, we talked around that. He feels that it's the first time that in his career that he's actually had that communication skills outside him to be able to go at that space, like you touched on, Jip, or being able to put the crossfield kicks, whether that's coming from shooter or outside back. So that's how important it is. If you've got someone outside you, it's not just all based around the 9s and 10s. Yes, the scrutiny comes on the 9s and 10s around game management, but if you have a very good talking winger, your fullbacks, even that centre area that you're kind of alluding to there, Jip.
Over! Tane! Yo, Mo!
Stevenson unselfishly dishes it off and banks us in again.
Nice boy, awesome boys. Nice boy.
That gives your 10 so much decisiveness and understanding of like where the space is. So if you're not getting anything from the outside and you're kind of just looking as a 9 and 10 to make all those decisions, it's really hard to be able to drive the team right and make the right decisions if they aren't working for you.
And we saw that with the mic'd up shots of Sean Stevenson, that communication coming forward, and then also him coming in and doing that short attack and kicking game.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty cool footage, that, wasn't it? And it showed Sean as a whole player and what a leader he's developed into. You know, there was obviously, even when he was on the sideline, you know, he was priming players to get them into the right mindset, and, you know, IDing really early, his comms just seemed like they were constant and continuously demanding from himself, but demanding from others to identify what he's seen, or at least confirm what he's seen so that they can execute. And most of the times when he did all that talking and identified those opportunities, they pulled it off, which made for good television, made him look extremely good. But yeah, it was a cool innovation in the technology use.
And hopefully we see a lot more of it in the future, because it's pretty cool and getting us right up to speed with the best of the NFL and all of those kind of things.
Yeah, well, I still think about the warning ball to McCullum.
Oh yeah.
You know, like that was, he literally just spoke through what he's going to do and then, you know, cleaned him up. So being able to engage in that from a fan's aspect, like Bryn and I have lived it, so, you know, like it's normal, but I haven't lived a cricket career, haven't lived an NFL career, so when you get that insight, you know, it is exciting and really interesting, so it's a cool development.
Now, when we look at the Wallabies and Joe Schmidt in particular, he's obviously got an incredible amount of knowledge on all of the players in this All Blacks squad. But all other teams look at these stats and they understand all of it. Is there anything more that he will be able to garner out of his time within the All Black squad, which had the majority of these players in it, for the advantage?
Absolutely, because I think, you know, he's the sort of coach that pulls you up in the hallway or at breakfast or anything to talk footy. You know, very similar to Wayne Smith in that sense. And I think because they're such a trusted resource, you would open yourself up a little bit about what's concerning you, what potentially you need to work on. But he can't play the game. And a lot of it will stem from the tackle area and then their breakdown on attack. And that, to me, is just an attitude thing. And now we've seen it, you know, if we use Lockie Swinton as an example a few years back, we've seen it, we've spoken about Wallabies' attitude, and, you know, they tried to send him out and he took someone's head off and got red carded, and, you know, like, so it's got to be controlled aggression. I think where they've fallen over in previous years is, they've got the want, the desire, you know, even when Dave Rennie was there, you know, it wasn't a question of want, desire, or are you know, stronger than the opposition. It was the accuracy within that. So you've got to have that aggression with the ability to be accurate in those two areas, because currently those are the two areas that is just sucking the life out of them. They can't recover. They can't get momentum of their attack. Their attack is really easy to read, so it's just simple for defence systems to sort of just keep coming up and pressing them. And, you know, we've spoken at length already about the defence. So I feel, knowing Joe, he may have a slight take on who's there, but I think he'll be heavily fixated on what they can control and what they need to do, and that is going to take the accuracy first and foremost, but it's going to take some big bodies.
And Brenna, getting those chins up, making sure those players understand that they can do this, that must be a massive challenge coming off the back of something like that.
They would have been bitterly disappointed with how they went, you know, 7 days post a really good win in the wet. Your review will be knowing that, right, we need to be able to put those things wrong and put them into place around what that's going to look like to get a better performance, and they'll know the challenges as well. And they'll probably be thinking that, you know, the All Blacks are there right for the taking, because, you know, we're at a very situation where we've lost 2 test matches in a row against South Africa. Yes, I think for the majority of those matches we were the better side, but, you know, if you're Joe Schmidt, you want to be able to plant those seeds to be able to get it to a point where it's the last 15 minutes, where it's been an area that we've struggled with in the last 2 test matches against South Africa. So I think Joe Schmidt will be concentrated on himself. The breakdown area will be massive. They need to be able to get there right. The decision-making around when they kick and play without the ball is going to be really important. But then I think, lastly, decision-making under pressure, very similar to what the All Blacks have been experiencing in the last 10, 15 minutes. It's been able to nail your role in whatever that looks like. Defensively, attacking, effort areas, off the ball, hard ball gets, whatever it is, your decision-making under pressure to try and get it right execution-wise is probably going to be one thing that I think the All Blacks will be wanting to nail in the back end of games. But the Wallabies, I think, are going to need to do that for a full 80 minutes to get the result on the weekend.
Even though the history is weighted in the All Blacks' favour, if it wasn't for a simple error in Melbourne, they would have won that test. And that's exactly what they did. They drew it out through the 80 and really put the pressure on the All Blacks to have to do something pretty special. And in the end, they did. But if they can get to that territory where, you know, there is a little bit of doubt around that last 15 to 20 minutes, you know, like they're back in the contest. But, man, it's 20-3 up. They were 20-3 up and they got 64 points put on them. You know, there needs to be some big shifts attitude-wise in terms of their commitment to it. And when you talk about the review, you've got to see that. You've got to sit through it. If sometimes, like, I've been in teams where, and maybe this is my personality, but where it's like, look, it was a horrific day. Let's just bin that and focus forward. But you actually have to acknowledge fault and you have to acknowledge where it's gone wrong to fix it. And so hopefully, and I'm assuming knowing his personality, they would have had to sit through those defensive system breakdowns and then been into solution mode. Okay, well, what could we do? Who missed their role? Why did you miss the role? Where does it start? So they start problem solving rather than it being, I suppose, an interrogation on what you did poorly. It's framed in a way that the only way we can get better is to understand where we've gone wrong. And I think a lot of where they went wrong, you can look out wide for all the missed tackles, but I think it starts in tight and allowing that fast ball that they gave, which just put them on the back foot.
So, Brennan, when you've been in that situation along the way where you've copped a bad one, the messaging to you is more about, hey, we've seen you do this, you know you can do this, rather than you really stuffed this up, don't do that again.
It's more of a solution-based, right? It's been able to ask the question of what that scenario might be. So let's use my example for the ref example as an example, right? So, you know, what is the solution and how could have that been done better, right? I could have just said to the ref, like, look, I want to be able to, like, go dry the ball. And then I want to go dry the ball. So that's like a solution, like, if I have that time again to be able to get that right. Or it might be in and around, like, 2 in the tackle. The Argentinians were just so much better around that contact area. So when you go into review, in the defense review, the same boys, our collision area and being able to be efficient as these 2 in the tacklers was very poor on the weekend. So we need to be able to get the chop really good, being able to hold the ball really, really tight and being able to then, if that's, be able to throw it on the ground and go for a jackal, to hold it down, to slow down that ball for 3 seconds, or being able to barge through to slow it down, then that's a solution for then the players to be able to understand, if we're in this position again, this is what I want to try and concentrate on. So whenever you are going into reviews, it's predominantly mostly based around solutions of the scenarios that have been touched on in the clips, or sometimes it might just be around your effort. The whole review might be based around an effort-based review, and so those ones probably hurt, Jip. I think those are the ones when your effort and your intent gets questioned, because I think that's probably the toughest thing. Your job is to be able to work hard off the ball and have an intent in every single play that you're involved in. So I found those are probably the worst reviews, but predominantly it's always solution-based in reviews.
It's about asking the athlete to try and find the solution, you know, sort of like question theory and you know, because it can be awkward, man. Like, I've sat in many a room where sometimes before I would go into the meeting, I'd be told, can you just pipe down? Because I get awkward with silence, so I try to fill it. But it's, you know, it was out of care from the coaches, as they were like, you know, we need to let them find the solution, otherwise it's just going to be Groundhog Day. And I think that having that day and not rushing to what you're good at, like having that time to absorb where it went wrong, what you need to focus on as an individual, is massive, because it hurts. And that hurt builds a bit of fire in your gut. You've been challenged as a player, you've been challenged for your spot. It's a real crucial one, day 1 to day 2 after a big loss. And you'll know day 2 when people walk in, are they here to, you know, sort of make a change and bring the necessary edge, or are they here, you know, a little bit resentful or not happy with the take from the coaches in terms of the review?
I'm imagining it feels kind of like when you're in the classroom and the teacher asks a question and everyone is dead silent. Is it anxiety-inducing, thinking, I think I know the answer to this, but based off what happened on the weekend, I'm not sure I want to put that out there?
So there's an element of personality type. Is, you know, people like myself probably need to talk less, and people that, you know, are more reserved they've probably got the answer, or at least an innovating way of where to get better. So it's about creating that environment. That's why questions are important, rather than coming in and just saying this is terrible, like the old school ways. It's asking that question to draw the answer out, because you're trying to entice them into it's a safe environment. We're here for performance and we're here to improve, but you want them to know it's a safe environment that they can put their head up and it's not going to get chopped off. It's a fine balance, but I think those, I suppose, working environments are growing before the pressure's there, so hopefully you can draw on that.
Brendan, I'm imagining you're a guy who puts his hand up.
It was a race between
yeah, and I think... Yeah, well, I think and it's a good understanding as well. I think some players can take that criticism, and so for me, like if I know if I've done something wrong or there's been some terrible trends that I've had in my game, it's been able to say, I'll put my hand up first and be able to say, look, I've been really poor there. How can I get better? And also that shows to the group that you're accountable. And I think as players, it's really important to see players being accountable for the mistakes that they've done or things that they think that they haven't gotten right. So for myself and other leaders, that's a very powerful thing to be able to do. But then I think also as well, bringing out the questions, it's a great way, because on the field, the coaches aren't there. They drive, obviously, analyst work. They drive all the preview and the review. You know, they're obviously a big part of that conversation and discussion. But when you're on the field, they're not on there. So being able to ask questions in that kind of environment from coaches, whether it be players, and you're doing that consistently for, you know, a period of time, for a season or half a season, and that's a common trend that's happening. When you're getting onto the field, you're solution focused and you're answering those questions organically when you're out on the field, right? So I think in NPC, it's a big improvement that probably needs to happen with a lot of sides, more so for us. If you think about guys that aren't playing professionally, don't have the tools with the mental skills, and it's been able to, right, how do we get this group to be able to try and answer these questions, be solution-based, and be able to fix it themselves, other than probably just their club coaches or just coaches in general that are trying to have that kind of dictate and saying, this is how it's done, this is what you need to do, and being able to be proactive yourself and with the players on the field.
As a captain, I suppose that was something you had to really learn along the way, how to chat to each kind of individual and really get the best out of them. Oh, yeah,
look, massively. Like, I went back and studied a lot around sort of human behaviour and the evolutions of it to be a better captain, you know, because every person, you know, has a different personality and has a different way of receiving information. You know, I grew up, you know, with you know, strong, I suppose, family values and a certain way to do things, and that worked for me. But I soon learned that style didn't work for everyone when I was given captaincy young. So that growth has actually set me up a lot better for life after footy.
You're saying you're a disciplinarian at the start?
I'd never demand more than I demand on myself. I would always hold myself to a very high standard. But I had a few rough edges in my delivery, would be a nice way to say it. I wouldn't use many words, put it that way. I would probably rushed. And also, I told them what I thought rather than ask questions. And that was one of the biggest things that changed. It was like an aha moment for me. I was like, well, that makes sense. The time it takes me now is actually the time it's going to save on Saturday when it counts. And actually putting them and myself in that space, it actually teaches me to say less and listen. And it teaches, you know, the other person to step into that space and say more. And so, yeah, I just think I grew and you know, by the times towards the end of my career, you know, I felt I had a really good balance of, you know, delivery, but also learning a little bit more about the individual, not just always being rugby, even though everyone knows I'm a code head, but actually just, you know, those sorts of moments, having 5-10 minutes or, you know, a coffee or whatever, allows you to build that trust, to open up the avenue to sort of have that performance conversation. Without that, you're hoping that it's going to come off.
You've got to connect first up, I think so. Marty call it.
That's what I
believe.
Now, I certainly didn't at the start. I was all business. Like when I walked through, it's all rugby, and you know, we're here to get better every day. And I like living that way, but it certainly wasn't for everyone.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there's lots of lessons being learned at the moment by both the Wallabies and the All Blacks captain about all these kind of things as they deal with teams that aren't getting wins. And saying that, the All Blacks haven't been that bad. They pushed the world champions very, very far in both test matches. Let's get a little bit into some questions from the people out there. Of course, if you want to send us an email, aotearoa@rugbypod.co.nz, or get into the YouTube comments section. Probably be a few less South Africans in the comments section this week, so it'll probably be easier to decipher where those questions are. We'll see. But the ABs, not beaten by much. What does it need to improve from your perspective?
I suppose having that complete trust in the 23 and making sure that the spark plugs or energizers, whatever you want to call them, coming off the bench, feel that trust, but also are their own little unit. And what I mean by that is throughout the game they should be talking, okay, what did we do through the week? Oh, we've used that one, and you're almost playing the game through your head so that when you get on, you know what's been used, what's potentially still on offer, what worked well that potentially you think could be used again, and I suppose not leaving it till the last 10. Get some of the tiring bodies off with the pace, because you've got to think the Wallabies will try and play a fast up-tempo game, so that whole 23 mindset seems pretty critical, because if you look at the players, they're good enough. They're there for a reason. And I think you've got to back yourself and I suppose the coaching throughout the week that they should be in your head after the week. Well, this is always the way it was explained to me, is you should be ready to go by minute one, because an injury could happen, and it can't be all panic stations just because the main person's gone down in minute one. It should be calm, composed. We've planned for this, we've prepped for this. So real growth and development in that last 20 and how that bench is used would be, I think, a positive step, because before South Africa, they've made a lot of positive steps in parts of their game, like massively, especially on the attacking front. Discipline and the bench, I feel would be, if we can come out the back of the Bledisloe Cup and say, well, tick, tick, and we've continued the progression where else, I'll be ecstatic. It'll put them in really good stead for a really hard interview tour.
We certainly got a lot of comments and a lot of emails about the All Blacks' use of the bench and whether they have faith in that bench, the way that they use it, with Lomax still being out there late and then maybe being too tired and making a bad decision, etc. against the Springboks. We did have a question about Sam Darry, like why wouldn't you get Sam Darry, a massive, big, young body, on towards the end to make a big impact? This came from Macho Man. This is an email signed off as Macho Man. Email says Macho Man. I presume that's not his given name, but I don't think it's Randy Savage either. So with Darry on, just shift Vai to 6, Savea to 7, and Satiti to 8, Brynner, he says. Take Kane off late because he's an old boy and he might be running out of steam. Do you think that is a good solution for the All Blacks?
Look, I can understand the theory around a possibility of doing that, but look, sometimes, and Jip, you'll know this, the feel like sometimes having experienced players on in big moments is you just can't buy that. And I know obviously Sam Darry, Wallace, Satiti, the guys using that example, look, they would be able to, I'd presume they'd be able to, if they're given the opportunity to be out there, they'd trust themselves to be able to do it. But I think just sometimes in a tight situation when we wanted to win a game, the coaches felt having the more experienced players that have played more minutes and played more times in those kind of games to keep them on the field. Now, Lomax, I can obviously see, is a little bit different. I think a prop playing 70 minutes with Fletcher New, who's probably been there a while now and has actually played well against the South Africans, is a bit of a different one. But the Sam Darry example, yes, we could have put him on, but I think it was more so maybe a feel from the coaches and wanting the most experienced players out there in a very, very tight situation. And look, if you look in the past, Sam Whitelock, Brodie Retallick, those kind of guys and how much experience and IQ that they've had, it's just very, very invaluable when it comes to big test matches. So I think we will see a different ploy in the Bledisloe series, because I just don't think the Australians are where the South Africans are. I think my perception is that it's going to be more dominant for us. So our bench will actually be used a lot more, and hopefully with in turn, the opportunities that they are going to get in those games, it's going to then hopefully set them up for when they go into the end of the year. But I think for the South Africans 2 test match series, it was just based around getting the most experienced guys on to make the high IQ plays and try and winning a test match, even though that was probably one of the areas that wasn't very good the last 10 or 15 minutes in those 2 test matches.
How do I put it? If you look at Tupou Vaa'i and Sam Cane, like everything's measured. They know the GPS, they know, the heart rates, and they know by looking at their body language. And I think those 2 guys, statistically, it doesn't match up that Sam didn't deliver in that last 20. Statistically, if anything, he lifted. And I think Tupou Vaa'i was having so much success defensively in their line-out we knew how important that was, and I don't think he was tiring. So I don't have such a drastic concern with that, because Luke Jacobson obviously came onto the side and I think he made 10 tackles in 15 minutes. You know, like, he was busy. So I don't think that is what I'm trying to say around the use of the 23, that they must be used. But I think it's about, if they are going to be used, is 10 minutes enough to make a difference?
One of the things that we get a lot of emails on all the time is this thing about this Ardie Savea at 7, which everyone's onto. There's another email here from Bevan Hewitt where he's asking about Vai at 6 and Savea at 7 and Satiti at 8. And I suppose I'm really keen to get into whether you guys think it is a good idea. It hasn't happened for a long time, Savea at 7. So consecutive coaches have not thought that that's the way to go. Is Savea at 7 a good or a bad option, and why?
It's hard, because, I mean, he was World Player of the Year off the back of playing number 8. He is a power athlete, and it does seem to suit his game. You know, he's got the most ball carries in the forward pack. You want him carrying the most. So in terms of balance, you know, Sam Cane's got the most rucks and has for the last 4 years. That suits Sam Cane's game. And what we saw from Wallace was actually quite nice, like taking a little bit of focus off Ardie, and now eyes are thinking, okay, well, Wallace can run just as well now, hopefully create some opportunities for Ardie. So I don't ever look at it just on individuals' performances. You've got to look at the 3 positions and where you're going to get the work, because it has to be done. It's not going away. That work's not disappearing. If we just have players that are specialists, you know, in terms of carrying the ball, then there's potentially going to be rucks left that aren't cleaned. And that has to be factored in. And everyone's just got to know their role. As I've said previously on this, if Patrick was around us at the Blues, Tom Coventry was like, everyone get to the side and put him as the main ball carrier. So it's just playing to your strengths.
Yeah.
And I think we've got to pick the loose forward trio to play to our strengths. And moving players around from lock to 6, like Tupou Vai's in such good form at lock. You know, been an absolute nuisance at defensive lineouts. Like, moving him now would be silly in my opinion.
And then you've got, I suppose, the fact that Blackadder, until he got injured, played well, Bryn. You know, there are options there. So TT looked great straight off the bat. But we are going into next season without Sam Cane. So I suppose people are going, what's the solution?
And saying that, you could easily, if it was an Ethan, you could easily move an Ardie to 7 and a Jacobson or Satiti at 8, because Ethan's going to do the cleaning.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if you want to move...
The jersey number doesn't matter. Is that what you're saying? Like, Ardie will be Ardie whether he's wearing 7 or 8. You've got to get people around who rolls.
Well, you don't want Ardie wasting time in there. He's a power athlete. It would not be a great use of his skills. So even if he was in 7, you'd still want him carrying the ball. It would be a waste.
Yeah, I think if that's with Cane going over to Japan, Dalton comes back into that mix, you've got Blackadder that can cover at 7. It might just be actually be able to have Ardie starting at 8, but he actually ends up just going to 7 in the last 20 minutes. And then being able to bring a Wallace at number 8 and then being able to have that kind of mix there. Because I think, like, if you look at what Sam does really, really well, he makes Ardie be able to have that explosive ball athlete because he does all the hard work. Hits the rucks, his efficiency, being able to get over the ball, being able to, I guess, win those rucks to be able to then get that fast ball. We don't want Ardie doing that. Like, yes, he can do it, but geez, we want him with the ball in hand and being able to use his skills and get his lead drive. So I think the balance of what they want collectively from the 3 of them will be really important. But if we wanted to have the idea of having Ardie at 7, I wouldn't mind him if he wanted to be able to go in the last 20 minutes of a game, put him on at number 7, and then you can have a Wallace or TT coming on at 8 with the Blackadder, or then bringing a Jacobson on, or someone else in that number 6 position as well. Or what you could do is you could bring him off the bench, like do like a Kwaha Smith. You know, him being able to be really, really fresh and being able to have 30 minutes of being able to have tiring bodies, tiring people.
Who off the bench?
Ardie.
Ardie Savea. As another, this is hypothetical, Jip. I'm just saying hypothetical.
I just was making sure I heard right. Sorry.
I don't think that. But if you're talking around how good Quaha Smith is in those last 30 minutes and how many times he gets turnovers, scores tries, gets over the advantage line, a fresh Ardie Savea for the last 30 minutes could be an option, but I don't think so.
I wouldn't think that Scott Robertson have any chance of entering Wellington at any stage in the next 10 years if he didn't start Ardie Savea. He'd be sought after and tracked down.
It is, when you think about it, like a Dalton could play that role, Brynner.
Yep.
In terms of that, he's a power athlete, he's explosive, he could play that Quaha Smith role. Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy team to pick. But like what I'm just trying to provide context is you can't just look at individual performances and just put them in. You've got to make sure that it works for the systems that they're running and how they're running them. And if you're a Springbok, you don't want to tackle Ardie Savea. You don't want to, if he's not got the ball, beautiful, you're doing your job. If he's got the ball more times than not, well, somehow, it's no different to how players used to run at Pocock, so he couldn't be the hunter and things like that. You need to, sort of water your strengths so that you can pick them apart. And yes, he hasn't probably had the game-breaking carries that everyone's used to, but because there's so much attention on him, it's created space elsewhere.
And saying that his post-contact meters are through the roof in comparison to everybody else.
They always are, because you watch he'll fight through that leg drive, which, sometimes a good thing and sometimes it's not, because you sometimes need that quick ball, as Brynner will know. To
get isolated, then Quagga Smith gets over the top of it and you're in trouble.
Yeah, so but because he's got so many bodies that are focused on him, it's a positive and hard work for him, because at the moment everyone wants to stop him. But that means if there's 3 or 4 bodies on him, then there's space elsewhere.
Speaking about places to improve for the All Blacks, we've got another email through from Jamie Banks. And Jamie, we'll give you the players' sports ball from Gilbert there for this question, just because I love it when people come at us with questions like this. Let's get a little bit technical. Do we need more bodies in motion on attack to make the defence hesitant enough to allow the likes of Savea to break through the line more easily?
Oh, look, Brendan and I are big on bodies in motion. There's no question about that. But I think that's what we've probably tried to say has improved a hell of a lot after the 2 South African tests, is those bodies in motion has allowed us to actually get the ball to width. Where it could get even better is, this is a rugby term, probably not the right one. Anyway, it's like you sort of explode it out the back. Like a bomb's gone off, and that quick ball allows you to almost just go through the hands, and you don't even need bodies in motion. You can get it to the edge and you bend them, sort of like the Aussies did, and you pop it and keep it going. So bodies in motions are a big thing, maybe potentially more off slower ball, but ideally we get to the point where we're fixated on nailing that carry clean area so that we can get the ball up and just play, basic rugby, catch pass.
And if you have a let's look at the growth from the English series. The first 2 test matches, we harped on about not being able to get the ball to the edge. So we touched on, Paul Finney touched on it as well, the depth of being able to get that second pivot, or the guys that are going to be able to see that line speed pressure. You've got to be able to try to get the ball, whether it's through run, pass or kick. And I think through the duration of this rugby championship, and especially against the South Africans, who we've struggled with when it's come to line speed pressure, we found ways to be able to bend them and be able to get around them. So there's been a massive improvement in that. I think just being able to take the opportunities when they do come. You look in that first test match, we got 3 penalties from it. So, if you're nitpicking, it's been able to finish those opportunities and been able to score points a little bit more frequently when we're in those positions.
And we've got another question for you, Bryn, from Jamie as well. Do we need one more back who excels at putting others in space through their running lines and the timing of their passes within the current All Black structure?
Well, I think we've seen that. We've seen the growth of that. I think, Rieko Ioane runs great hard lines. So when we've got him moving with his body in motion, and then you've got the likes of Damien McKenzie, Beauden Barrett when he was at fullback, and then even Geordie Barrett as well. They have pretty good facilitators that have been able to get the ball to the width. Like I even look at Beauden on the weekend previously when he came on. His touches and been able to get ball into space is really, really good. So I definitely think that we have the players in that squad to do that. So, with the guys that I just touched on, like Damien McKenzie, Bowden Barrett, when he's at forward, Will Jordan has a pretty good distribution game, and Geordie Barrett as well. He's got a great left to right passing, right to left passing, and can kick as well. So I think it's just been able to marry that up in tight situations and just been able to get that ball to the edge, which we saw, I think, pretty well in that second test match. But what the way to get that ball there, and I hate to bring this back, but Jip always touched on it, the game line percentage and being able to get the ball going forward and having it on our own terms is probably the most important things to be able to get that ball to the edge. So we did that really well against the South Africans and in the second test match against the Argentinians. So we need to continue to keep being really good in that space and getting that quick ball to be able to play on top of teams.
Let's talk about the way that Argentina were going, because they were doing a lot of offloading on the last weekend, and now their style, Brynner, how do you feel that Argentine style that we saw last weekend, where it was quick, ball out, will go against the Springboks this week in Argentina?
Well, I don't think they can have the same success around the quick ball, because I think physicality-wise, the South Africans are pretty good. And look, we had our best performance in terms of game line percentage, and that was only at 40%, whereas against the Australians, they were at 52%. So every 1 to 2 ruck, it was pretty much lightning quick ball. So, but that would hopefully be what they're wanting. Now, whether they're going to get to that number, I'm not too sure. But what I really did enjoy, and they're going to have to do this against South Africa, is the collisions and what they did do. They were able to offload. And anytime you have that line speed pressure defence and you can get little offloads to be able to go in behind teams, it's really hard to be able to sit and then being able to come out like a Colby does, or their outside backs to be able to come out. So the physicality of the breakdown will be massive. And also I really enjoyed their backs. I touched on it last week around their skill set and being able to get the ball to the edge, fixing the person on the edge to be able to then make a line break or being able to then score a try off that. So hopefully the continuation of their phase play attack with their backs will be at the level where it was on the previous weekend. But the biggest area that they're going to have to worry about is their set piece and their discipline. Too many times in the past couple of years, we've talked around their discipline and not getting it right. And look, on the last match they had 2 penalties in 60 minutes after the 20th minute. So if they can get that right, but I think the scrum is going to be a big part for them and line out more. I think it's an area that they've struggled in big test matches, and I know that the South Africans will be wanting to go at them and the line out more. And I think the scrum as well. They did have a form of scrum dominance against the Australians, but I don't think they'll get the same scrum dominance. But they'll need to be on in those areas to have a chance against the South Africans.
You have to think they're going to have a lot of changes, which can make you clunky as a side. So Argentina really need to be fixated on that first 20 and making hay while the sun shines, because they'll find their rhythm. They'll probably have some protection off the bench. They won't want to use that early. So that sort of first 20 minutes to play the style they finish with, I think would be beneficial, because it is high risk. But as we've seen, high reward if they can get to that edge and play that pop touch game down, I suppose, that 15-metre channel. But any team currently that the South Africans seem to put out, they just find a way to win. Winning is a habit in a way, and they've just got that positive, I suppose, aura around them at the moment that they do put a bit of fear in the opposition. And sometimes that makes the opposition a little bit hesitant. But what they need to do is look at that 23 and ask themselves, is this the World Cup winning side? No, probably not. Okay, well, what dents can we make? And what information do we have on these individuals?
And South Africans are in a position with the points on the table where they can really make these little adjustments with no fear.
100%. Like they're in the box seat. But also, they've created so much competition in their squad. The Nets man-up theory has worked as well. But I'm just saying, from an Argentinian point of view, you've got to believe you can attack something. Otherwise, there's no point going in. And I think that first 20 minutes, and if there's a lot of changes, them being hesitant and just finding their rhythm is the time that they need to strike. They can't wait till halfway through the second. If they start as slow and as inaccurate as they did against the Wallabies, the game will be gone by half-time.
The good thing for South African fans is that Tony Brown has just come in and they're still evolving. They're not a finished product by any means necessary. So they're just going to keep continuing to do the things that they've been layering in through the start of this rugby championship. And so the areas that I touched on, their wide-to-wide ability to be able to play with ball on hand. They've got a great kicking game with Grant Williams, which we saw in tight situations. So if it's raining, they can go to that contestable game. They're able to suffocate teams. But then also, like I just touched on, their set piece. it's a massive staple in DNA with how they're able to win games. So I won't see that changing, but what I do like in the South Africa is that they can win in multiple ways. They can win you through your set piece, they can win you through your contestable kicking game, and they can win through an attacking brand of rugby that they are playing. So it just depends which one they want to play in certain situations in the game. So yeah, I hate to say that as a Kiwi because there's not a lot of chinks in their armour, unfortunately, at this stage, and I think they're only going to get better with the longer that Tony Brown's there, and that attacking brand is only going to continue to keep getting better. So a very scary thought for the world of rugby.
And I suppose if you look back to the second test with the All Blacks, that kick space in behind Bryn, that short kicking game, you've got to think the South Africans and Tony Brown are going to attack that. Even against the Wallabies, there were still opportunities to do that. So that space, they don't seem to be... They obviously feel they can cover it, and they had an off night against the All Blacks, but I think you'd want to test that early because then question marks will come.
Mm-hmm. Now, the women's game also had a massive game on the weekend where the Black Ferns went to Twickenham to take on the world #1 English side. It didn't quite get the world record crowd that I suppose we were expecting. And a Black Ferns team that hasn't played a lot of footy together recently looked like a Black Ferns team that hasn't played a lot of footy together recently. Chipper.
Well, it's a little bit similar to the All Blacks. They created a hell of a lot of opportunities that they didn't probably capitalise, especially in that first half. But again, you've got to start strong. You get 17-0 behind at half-time against the #1 team in the world. It is always going to be a big mountain to climb. They came back extremely well. And I think we saw, especially out wide, when provided the opportunity, players like Vahakolo and co can be really, really lethal. But that platform and that ability to win the breakdown early to give them time and space is critical. And I think you saw their want and desire to kick more and definitely an improvement in length of kick. So that's only going to develop. And I do feel like it should give them some confidence, just even when they played England last time here in New Zealand, is 24-12, 17-0 at half-time. They actually came back really strong, and they should have some confidence that they've shown enough, particularly in that second 40, to get a result in the World 15 game. I genuinely think they would have got a lot of confidence from it, even though it was a loss. They put a lot into that test match and preparing for it, and administration put a lot of work in to get it up and running as well, to give them that opportunity before World 15, and I definitely think it's done its job.
Bruno, we talked about going hot off the back of the pod from the halfback. Maya Joseph kicking like she was Antoine Dupont off to the wing was something else. That's a great addition to their game.
Oh, I've been really impressed with how she plays. I know this is a big rap, but very similar to how she sees the field as a Kendra Coxedge. Like Kendra would do those kind of things in terms of her kicking play and being able to see space in behind, and she does that very, very well. Like that kick she did on the weekend, like that's a pretty tough kick to do. And to be able to hit that, to be able to see that space as well. Now, whether there was an acknowledgement of a call from the winger at that time, but there's been multiple times in this year that I've seen her be able to use her kicking game, whether that's going long, which we've seen an improvement in wanting to evolve the Black Ferns kicking game, which has been really good. And then also as well, her ability around the ruck. She's got a great pass. She's done a couple of sniping at the hard defence with inside and outside ball. So she definitely is the full package, and it just seems that she isn't a rookie. Like this is a rookie year in terms of being an international player, and she's becoming one of a very important cog on that wheel for that Black Ferns. So yeah, I've been really, really impressed, and we're only going to see a better version with the more times that she's been able to play in meaningful test matches and getting runs underneath the belt like a Kendra Coxedge did for the most of her career.
We had an email through from Ted Knight, who's a frequent contributor via email, probably weekly, talking about the new rule at the 22. If you catch a ball off the kickoff within the 22, you can call a mark, and therefore your exit play becomes super duper easy in comparison, Bryn. England really utilised that well, and the Black Ferns didn't.
Well, it's a plan because I think a lot of them can kick, right? It's a very, very easy way to be able to kick. You've got Hunt and Aitchison who are very well in being able to kick the ball, and also their outside backs are able to kick as well. So we touched on it probably earlier in there when this rule was actually made. I don't like it personally. I think it's been able to take away the defensive pressure of being able to try and get a steal for 2 to 3 phases before kicking. But yeah, unless you want to be able to maybe make it a little bit shorter so then teams aren't able to be able to go for that mark. But yeah, England did it very well, and it's a very easy out in terms of being able to get a team to try and exit. So it if the Black Ferns had their time again, maybe they would go a little bit shorter to be able to get that that ball not to be able to be called for a mark, and then I guess it might take 2 or 3 phases where they can have opportunities to be able to try and counter-ruck, make a good decision around the ruck for a jackal, or I guess puts kick pressure off the number 9 or number 10. Because if you just let's look at the first Argentinian test match when Carades would put it right side on the 22 and it's on the 5 metre line, and how hard it was for the All Blacks to be able to exit from that. And so we touched on around the All Blacks kicking game in that first test match, they weren't able to exit on their own terms. So if it's done really, really well with that high kick, you can make massive opportunity to be able to put teams under pressure with like Carades from the Argentinian team.
Right, we've got a few games coming up this weekend. Obviously, let's start with the All Blacks versus Australia. As far as what you think the scoreline is likely to be, I know you're going to pick. What's the scoreline going to look like?
I think obviously the All Blacks. Thinking 32-10.
Geez, that's a solid victory in Sydney.
Yeah, I think pretty similar. I'm not going to give a score update prediction, but I'll give maybe 2-3 tries would probably be a bit.
Come on, mate. He's asked for a score prediction.
I'm happy 2-3 tries. We'll call it 21 points.
21-0.
40-19. That's what I'll go.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, South Africa versus Argentina.
South Africa.
South Africa.
I think it might be tight though. It's actually depending on who they name. But if you look at the squad, there is going to be a lot of change.
Brenner?
Yeah, I think sometimes you have the big changes, team people might think it might be a little bit more clunky, but the South Africans have shown that even whoever they do put out there, they put in a pretty good performance. So, I'll go South Africa, but again, depending on how many people, very similar to Jip, it might be a bit tighter than it probably should be.
Right, we've got Pacific Nations Cup as well, USA versus Samoa. We saw Samoa go down to Japan. So, where do you think that?
I'll stick with Samoa.
Samoa?
I think if they lose, they'll be pretty concerned with where things are at.
Yeah, it's a tough time over there. Tough time.
Yeah, I was pleased to see Milani Nanai debut though.
Yeah.
He's obviously one of that international experience for a while, and coming to the latter part of his career, it certainly meant a lot to him and his family, which is always cool to see.
It's done its dues. Brenner?
Yeah, I'll be going Samoa.
Samoa as well. And then Japan versus Fiji. This is probably the game that I suppose decides this competition. Brenner?
Yeah, this has been played in Japan, right? Is that right?
That's right.
Yep, well, very, very hot over there at the moment. I think the Samoans, and talking to a couple of them, they found that heat very, very difficult. But I think with the Fijians there, the heat won't be a problem with how they, a lot of them playing in Fiji. But I really enjoyed how Japan played against the Samoan team. I think they weren't as convincing that they probably should have been against America and Canada. But if you're talking around work off the ball and efforts off the ball, they are trying to play an expansive game. They've got a lot of animation in and around with their backs that work tirelessly in and around the background. I think just their execution is probably a little bit off in terms of being able to have too many unforced errors. But I think I've seen enough from Japan to get the job done. If they can get the animation and just get the turnovers down a little bit, I think they might ask a little bit more, too many questions for the Fijians in Japan.
Tossel viti tossel. Go Fiji, go. On Fiji all day.
Fiji all day.
All day. It's my second favourite team.
Right, fair enough. So this is all heart, no head.
No, I think Fiji will win.
Fiji as well?
They should.
Yeah.
They definitely should. And as Bryn said, the conditions shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah. We will have a guest on next week who's up in Japan at the moment experiencing the heat. Apparently he's in training camp and it's pretty brutal. And that's Will Genia. Will Genia is going to join us to break down the test match, the first Bledisloe next week. So we look forward to having Will back on the show. Friend of the show, been on a couple of times already. We love having Will on.
I know who's excited.
Yeah, look who's very
excited. The old mate over there.
Yeah.
7 sleeps, can't wait. Get them on here.
So thank you for joining us. Send us an email, aotearoarugbypod@sky.co.nz. Jump into the YouTube comments section. We'll scope through those if you've got any questions to put there. Of course, you got the chance to win the Gilbert Ball from Players Sports if you send through and we choose your question as the winner of that week. So we will catch you next week. Thank you to Jipper. Thank you to Brynner. Thank you to all the crew who make this show happen. And kia pai tawiki. Have a great week from the Aotearoa Rugby Pod.